tonight. 10 more candidates will participate in the second round of the Democratic debates in Miami. On stage tonight, you will see the current polling leader in the race, former Vice President Joe Biden, along with fellow PAC leaders, Senators Bernie Sanders and Kamala Harris. The debate will also feature a pair of electoral newcomers, spiritual guru Marianne Williamson and businessman Andrew Yang. If tonight's debate is anything like yesterday's, you can expect candidates to fight for speaking time. Laura Podesta has the highlights from Miami.
With 10 Democratic candidates crowding the stage, most spoke for a total of less than 10 minutes during the 2-hour presidential debate.
Thank you.
The first question of the night went to Elizabeth Warren.
When you've got an economy that does great for those with money and isn't doing great for everyone else, that is corruption, pure and simple.
The Massachusetts senator took aim at President Trump's economic policies, and she wasn't the only one.
I live in a low-income black and brown community. I see every single day that this economy is not working for average Americans.
Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar slammed the president's social media habits.
I don't think we should conduct foreign policy in our bathrobe at 5 in the morning.
Immigration was one of the biggest topics.
We need to be the party of working people, and that includes a party of immigrants.
Former Housing Secretary Julian Castro challenged his rivals to end the criminalization of illegal border crossing.
Some, like Congressman O'Rourke, have not, and I want to challenge all of the candidates to do that. I just think it's a mistake, Bethel. I think it's a mistake.
I helped to introduce legislation that would ensure that we don't criminalize those who are seeking asylum.
It was a packed house at the Miami Performing Arts Center where the debate was held last night, and millions more tuned in at home and at watch parties across the nation. Reaction among potential voters was, not surprisingly, mixed.
I believe Cory Booker was the winner. The one I didn't really care for tonight was Beto.
I want somebody that will energize people.
10 more candidates, including Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, and Kamala Harris, will take the same stage tonight. Laura Podesta, CBS News, Miami.
And joining me now to break down the debate are CBSN political contributors Sean Sullivan, Antjuan Seawright, and Sean is a Washington Post reporter. Antjuan is a Democratic strategist. I'd also like to bring back in editor-in-chief of The Hill, Bob Cusack. Thank you all for being here. Quickly, I'd really like to get each of your opinions on who had a good night and who had a bad night. Antjuan first, let's go to Sean and then Bob.
The best night came from the former mayor of San Antonio, Mayor Castro. I think that this was his chance to not only reintroduce himself to the voters, but remind people that he's a viable candidate. I think he did a great job of balancing policy argument versus personality when he engaged with the former congressman from Texas. Although Texas is very big, it's not big enough for the both of them. And so I think he did a great job, and I think he gave voters a chance to take a second look at him. And there's no doubt in my mind this will be a momentum opportunity for him and possibly a way for him to make it to the second debate.
Sean, what do you think?
Another candidate that went into the debate trying, it appeared, to have a breakout moment was Senator Cory Booker, somebody who has not been polling at the top of the pack, has been struggling to sort of gain momentum. It seemed like his goal was to get some attention, get some notice, and to certain extents, he did that. The question is now whether that will actually translate to support in these polls and in these early states where he's trying to organize a big ground game. So he was somebody who I think came in this debate with pretty high stakes, and the early signs are that his supporters are pretty happy with his performance.
Bob?
I do think that Castro and Booker had a very good night, but I think Warren was the winner. She has been surging in the polls, and now I think she did very well. She held her own. She got a decent amount of talking time. I think someone who had a bad night was Beto O'Rourke, and I think his fundraising is going to take a major hit. Remember, earlier he was raising millions of dollars very easily. Now he is facing a huge uphill battle.
I do agree with you that Senator Warren had a good night, but the question was asked who had the best night, and I think Castro had the best night. Warren had a good night, but she did not need to have the best night because she came in that debate as the clear-cut front runner of that particular group, and so I think she maintained her Tier 2 second place status because of last night.
Well, to your point, Castro agrees. He thinks that he had a really good night as well. He was talking about debate night at a fundraising press conference. Let's go ahead and listen to that clip.
I think when all is said and done, we're going to have had our best fundraising night of the campaign. I'm confident that I'm going to meet the threshold for the September debate. As y'all know, the threshold for that is 4 polls that you're at 2% in between June 28th and August 28th, and 130,000 unique donors. I believe that we're going to get to 2% in those 4 polls, especially after this debate performance.
Antjuan, that's to your point that you just made. As someone who's worked on a campaign, though, do you feel as though that was a good enough mark to actually move the needle? Because in the same breath, you talk about Elizabeth Warren being really a name catcher that everyone is familiar with.
Well, move the needle is all relative. I think for someone like Castro, it's like young Antjuan going to the gas station. You just put enough gas in the car to keep getting down the road. And I think last night he proved his ability to go further down the political road. We'll see what happens if it pans out. He makes it to the second debate, and if he does, then he will be back in the same place of trying to fight to make it to the third debate. At the end of the day, everyone is fighting for dear political life. In my view, if you're not Joe Biden to this point, you're on political life support. So everything you do impacts what happens next, and I think he did a good job of positioning himself for whatever next is for him.
All right, then, Sean, what's in that IV drip if we're in some a health crisis here as far as the politicians are concerned? What is the significant difference between these candidates here?
Well, we saw some of the significant differences play out last night. We may see more tonight. One area that stuck out last night was healthcare. We did see a clear line of distinction between candidates like Elizabeth Warren and Bill de Blasio, who favor a single-payer, a Medicare for all approach, and somebody like John Delaney, more of a centrist candidate who says, look, I want to provide healthcare for all Americans, but I don't want to abolish private insurance. So this has been one of the biggest dividing lines in this Democratic primary, and we may see that line sharpen tonight, where you have Joe Biden, who is somebody who favors expanding the ACA, versus Bernie Sanders, who wants to create a Medicare for all system that would indeed effectively abolish private insurance. The two of them are going to be standing right next to each other in the debate tonight. So we could see this line of distinction that's already forming pretty deeply in the Democratic Party become even bigger coming out of tonight's debate.
Bob, I know we had talked about this leading up to the debate. We weren't sure how the candidates were going to handle this. Were they going to attack Trump? Were they going to try to identify their party themselves? What do you think? What was the sense from the candidates? Did they spend as much time trying to define the party as they were trying to define themselves?
It's interesting because they spent a lot of time going after Mitch McConnell, basically the same or if not more than President Trump. I think that changes tonight, especially with Biden's argument that he is the best bet to beat President Trump. At the same time, this is a unique situation for Joe Biden. At prior presidential runs, he was kind of an also-ran. Now he's going to be taking punches. Can he take a punch? Can he counterpunch on a lot of these issues, whether it's Green New Deal, Medicare for all, that he does not agree with the left on? He is going to be attacked, and it could be a lot of Bernie Sanders going after him. They're not the best of friends when they served in the Senate only 2 years, but they're going to be clashing tonight for sure.
Antjuan, I want to ask you this. Yeah. There were a couple of points last night where we heard New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio from the end of the stage shout over just to get a little bit more airtime. He wanted to make his presence known. Do you think that was a good strategy? And if so, do you think we'll see other candidates tonight try to do the same thing?
I call that the mayor using his political alligator arms and trying to fight his way to relevancy. Look, to this point, although he did make the debate stage, not many people view him as a very serious candidate. So I think he was trying to break into the conversation and attempting to do what the former congressman from Texas was trying to do and have a social media moment to gain some traction and attention. I don't know how much he moved the needle last night with his attempt, but I respect his honest attempt.
Okay, Sean, let's talk about, too, we've been hearing a lot of the word socialism leading up to the debate as it pertains to some of the Democratic candidates. We're talking about Bernie Sanders specifically. Do you think with him being on stage tonight that that's going to be a topic that comes up more often?
Yeah, it very well could be, and you have somebody in John Hickenlooper who is not necessarily a top-tier candidate, but who has already been a pretty outspoken candidate saying, look, socialism is not the way that the Democratic Party ought to go. And so we could see potentially an exchange between Senator Sanders and Governor Hickenlooper. It's pretty clear that Republicans want to make socialism a centerpiece of the 2020 campaign. We're seeing that not only at the presidential level, but we're seeing congressional candidates bring that up. They're eager to run against the idea that the Democratic Party is being overtaken by a socialist vision. Now, we heard leading up to this debate a speech from Senator Sanders defending his view of democratic socialism and what that actually means. The question is, will that actually register with voters? Will they see a distinction? And ultimately, how will voters decide? There are many Democrats who are nervous about the idea of the party being defined by democratic socialism, by having to combat these attacks that they are going to face from President Trump and Republicans. But so the challenge is there for Senator Sanders. Can he convince the Democratic Party beyond just his core base of supporters that, hey, democratic socialism is a vision that is not only one policy-wise that he thinks is good, but is a political winner for the party going into 2020. That's his challenge going into tonight.
There's another clip I want to play for you all. It's from the Trump campaign's national press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, and she's talking about the candidates on stage last night. Let's take a listen.
We feel that the Democratic field is one socialist organism with many heads, so they're essentially an iteration of the same pattern. And last night, I think we saw that radicalism at play when you had Amy Klobuchar say that she is open to decriminalizing border crossings along with Julian Castro. So for us, that was the moment that told us all you needed to know, that there is no centrist lane available, that the only lane available is far left.
All right, well, Amy Klobuchar, by most measures, people would say, is on the moderate end of the Democratic field. Bob, what does this tell you about how the Trump campaign and Republicans in general are going to try to attack the eventual Democratic nominee, really regardless of who it is?
We're going to hear a lot about socialism no matter who wins the nomination. It's a tougher argument if Joe Biden wins compared to Elizabeth Warren or certainly Bernie Sanders. So, but you're going to talk about, I mean, Republicans love talking about the Green New Deal and Medicare for All. Those are the issues that Nancy Pelosi doesn't want to talk about because they don't have the votes to even pass the Democratic House. I thought it was also very interesting that Republican strategy going into last night was, hey, this is boring. These candidates are boring. Like, politics is a show now, and President Trump, of course, is a showman. He's far more interesting than these 10 candidates. I think you could see that continuing into tonight, that these guys are just boring. We're exciting, and that's politics right now. I think that's kind of a winning argument.
So, Antjuan, I saw you nodding your head in agreement. And I wanted to bring you in on this because if Republicans are going to attack any Democrat as a radical socialist, no matter how moderate they truly are, should they eliminate any fear among Democrats of reaching for more left policies?
No, listen, at the end of the day, no matter what picture the Republicans try to paint, we're a very center-left party holistically. Now, you do have a few loud voices on the choir, some are fairly new, who are singing louder, and they tend to attract most of the attention. But that's not a true reflection of us holistically as a party. You're talking to someone who is deep entrenched into our party politics. But the one thing about Kayleigh's interview that strikes me has been very consistent. Trump was elected off four things: anger, fear, frustration, and confusion. When they use buzzwords like socialism, like radical left, and all these buzzwords they use, those are the four sensitive points they want to touch among their audience, but also entrench that into the minds and hearts of independent thinkers and independent voters, because those are the voters, arguably, that helped Donald Trump get across the finish line. And so it's no surprise that they're using this tactic very early to try to define our party so they can then use that as a way to galvanize their base. So Democrats have to be extra careful not to run against each other, but run for our party's nomination. And when we get a nominee, that we are 100% united by whomever he or she may be.
Does that mean having more of a moderate Democratic candidate then to speak and try to sway those Trump voters? Because it was very clear what they voted on.
I'm not in the business of telling millions of voters what to do, but I would hope that we would nominate someone who could not only bring our party together at the end of the nomination process, take on Donald Trump, but help candidates up and down the ballot, because people forget we still have to maintain our majority status in the Congress, make up seats in the Senate, win some governor seats, and help with down ballot races like state legislative seats, so we can answer the call to what you were talking about previously, and that's this idea of gerrymandering that will be a big ticket item for Democrats and will ultimately decide this country's future.
All right. Thank you all for being here. Sean Sullivan, Antjuan, Seawright, and Bob Cusack. We appreciate your insight.